The wrong human captain. Zextar stood on the bridge of the massive warship Crimson Fang, his 4 eyes scanning the dark void of space. His scaled hands gripped the command rail so tight his claws left marks in the metal. Today would change everything. The Galactic Council had finally agreed to meet with the humans, those strange new, species that had somehow survived on a death world called Earth. Captain, his second-in-command, hissed through sharp teeth. The human transport ship approaches our docking bay. Zextar nodded. He had studied the files. Humans were supposed to be weak diplomatic creatures. Their planet was a nightmare of storms, earthquakes, and deadly animals, yet somehow they had thrived. The Council wanted to understand how. They had requested Earth send their best diplomat to negotiate a peace treaty and possible alliance. But Earth had made a terrible mistake. In the depths of space, aboard a small transport vessel, Marine Sergeant Jake Bulldog Morrison sat strapped in his seat, checking his gear for the 100th time. His scarred hands moved over his tactical vest, counting grenades, ammunition, and his favorite combat knife. The brass had told him he was being sent as a cultural ambassador to some alien ship. What they didn't tell him was that everyone expected him to smile, shake hands, and talk about peace. Jake had never been good at talking. He had been good at surviving 3 tours on Mars during the colony wars, taking out entire enemy squads single-handedly, and earning more medals than he knew what to do with. When the transport pilot announced they were approaching the alien warship, Jake cracked his knuckles and grinned. "Time to meet the neighbors," he muttered. The docking bay of the Crimson Fang was enormous, bigger than a football stadium. Strange alien soldiers lined the walls, some with tentacles, others with wings, and a few that looked like walking rocks. They all carried weapons that hummed with energy. In the center of the bay stood Captain Zextar, wearing his finest ceremonial armor, surrounded by his honor guard. The human transport ship landed with a soft thud. Steam hissed as the airlock opened. The aliens straightened, expecting to see a well-dressed human in a fancy suit, carrying briefcases full of treaties and trade agreements. Instead, out stepped Jake Morrison, 6 feet 2 inches of pure muscle and scars, wearing military fatigues and combat boots. His short brown hair was regulation cut, and his green eyes swept the room like a predator sizing up prey. Most shocking of all, he was armed to the teeth. Pistols on his hips, a rifle slung across his back, grenades on his belt, and that wicked-looking knife strapped to his leg. The alien honor guard raised their weapons instantly. Energy rifles whined as they powered up. Tentacles tightened on triggers. The tension in the air became thick enough to cut, but Jake just stood there, completely relaxed. He pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and squinted at it. "Let's see. I'm looking for Captain..." He struggled with the alien name. "Zextar. Yeah, that's it. I'm Sergeant Morrison, Earth representative." Captain Zextar's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. This was Earth's diplomat, this walking weapon. He had expected soft words and peace treaties, not a creature that looked like it could tear apart his honor guard with its bare hands. "There must be some mistake," Zextar said in perfect English, thanks to his translation device. "Earth was supposed to send a diplomat." Jake shrugged. "Don't know anything about that, sir. My orders are to represent Earth and humanity aboard your ship. Something about building relationships and showing what we're made of." He looked around at all the weapons pointed at him and chuckled. "Guess we're off to a great start." One of the honor guards, a massive creature with 6 arms and natural armor plating, stepped forward. "Human, you will surrender your weapons immediately." Jake's casual expression didn't change, but somehow he seemed to become more dangerous. "I don't think so, big guy. These aren't just weapons. They're part of who I am. You wouldn't ask a bird to cut off its wings, would you?" The 6-armed alien snarled and raised his energy cannon. "You dare refuse?" "Enough!" Captain Zextar commanded. Something in the human's stance, the way he carried himself, reminded the captain of the apex predators from his own homeworld. This was not a creature to threaten lightly. "Stand down, all of you." He approached Jake slowly, studying him with all 4 eyes. "Sergeant Morrison, I am Captain Zextar. Welcome aboard the Crimson Fang. Perhaps you can explain why Earth sent a warrior instead of a peacemaker." Jake looked the alien captain up and down, noting the ceremonial armor, the command presence, and the intelligence in those 4 eyes. Here was someone who understood respect and strength. "Well, Captain," Jake said with a slight grin, "maybe Earth figured the best way to make peace is to show we're not pushovers. Can't respect someone you can walk all over, right?" Before Zextar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and his communication officer's voice echoed through the docking bay. "Captain, long-range sensors detect massive enemy fleet approaching. Vorthan Empire ships, sir. At least 50 vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts." The blood drained from Zextar's face. The Vorthan Empire, their most brutal enemies, known for taking no prisoners and showing no mercy. His ship was powerful, but not against those odds. Jake, however, seemed to perk up at the news. "Vorthan Empire. Are those the bad guys?" "The worst," Zextar replied grimly. "They've been hunting this ship for months. They must have followed your transport." He turned to his officers. "All hands to battle stations. Prepare for—" "Wait," Jake interrupted. "How long until they get here?" "Approximately 2 hours," the communication officer reported. Jake nodded thoughtfully, then looked at Captain Zextar with an expression that sent chills down the alien's spine. It was the look of a predator that had just spotted prey. "Captain, looks like you've got yourself a problem. Lucky for you, Earth just sent you a solution." The alien honor guard exchanged nervous glances. This human was clearly insane. 1 human against 50 enemy ships, but something in Jake's confidence made Captain Zextar pause. Maybe, just maybe, Earth had sent exactly the right person after all. Rules of engagement. Captain Zextar led Jake through the corridors of the Crimson Fang, past nervous alien crew members who had never seen a human before. Some stopped and stared at Jake's weapons. Others whispered in their native languages about the strange predator walking among them. "Tell me about these Vorthans," Jake said as they walked, his tactical mind already working. "What makes them so dangerous?" Zextar's scales darkened, a sign of fear in his species. The Vorthan Empire conquers worlds by breaking the spirits of their enemies first. They don't just want to win battles, they want complete domination. They take prisoners only to torture them publicly, showing others what happens to those who resist. They entered the ship's tactical center, where holographic displays showed star maps and ship positions. Officers from a dozen different species worked at control stations, their various appendages dancing over alien keyboards. "Show him," Zextar commanded. The main display flickered to life, showing recorded footage from previous Vorthan attacks. Jake watched in silence as entire cities burned, as civilian ships were destroyed just for sport, as proud warriors were broken and humiliated before being executed. "They've wiped out 6 species completely," Zextar continued. "The Galactic Council has been fighting them for 20 years, but we're losing. They're too ruthless, too willing to do things that civilized beings won't." Jake studied the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet, 50 ships, just like the communication officer had said. 3 massive dreadnoughts at the center, surrounded by cruisers and destroyers. It was a fleet designed to overwhelm and crush any opposition. "What's your ship's fighting strength?" Jake asked. "The Crimson Fang is a heavy battleship," Zextar replied with some pride. "We have the most advanced weapons in the Galactic Council fleet, shields that can withstand almost anything, and a crew of 800 of the finest warriors from 20 different worlds. Against 50 ships." Zextar's shoulders sagged. "We might take down 10, maybe 15 if we're lucky. But in the end..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Jake was quiet for a long moment, studying the displays and thinking. The other officers watched him nervously. What was this human planning? Finally he spoke. "Captain, I need to know. What are the rules of engagement here? What are you and your people not willing to do?" The question surprised Zextar. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what lines won't you cross? What tactics are off limits? What would make you know better than them?" Jake gestured at the images of Vorthan destruction still playing on the screens. The bridge fell silent. It was a question that went to the heart of the Council's struggle against the Empire. They tried to fight with honor, to follow the rules of civilized warfare. The Vorthans followed no rules at all. "We don't target civilian vessels," Zextar said slowly. "We don't torture prisoners. We don't use biological or psychological warfare. We fight with honor," Jake nodded. "And that's why you're losing." The alien officers bristled at his blunt assessment, but Jake wasn't finished. Don't get me wrong, honor matters. But you know what matters more? Winning. Because if you lose, all those civilians you're trying to protect, they die anyway. All those principles you're fighting for, they mean nothing if you're not alive to uphold them. He pointed at the tactical display. Those Vorthans out there, they're expecting to fight the Galactic Council. They're expecting honor and rules and predictable tactics. They're not expecting humans. What are you suggesting? Zextar asked, though part of him was afraid of the answer. Jake's grin was sharp as his combat knife. I'm suggesting we give them a proper Earth welcome. We show them why humans didn't just survive on a death world, we thrived on it. Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered. The lights flickered and new alarms began sounding. Report. Zextar barked. Captain, the sensor officer called out, the Vorthan fleet has dropped out of hyperspace. They're deploying an attack formation. And sir, the officer's voice trembled, they're broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through. The main screen shifted to show the bridge of a Vorthan dreadnought. The creature that appeared was nightmare fuel. Standing 8 feet tall with black chitinous armor naturally grown from its body, 6 arms ending in razor-sharp claws and a face full of teeth designed for tearing flesh. This was Admiral Vexthul, known throughout the galaxy as the Butcher. Captain Zextar of the Crimson Fang, the monster spoke in a voice like grinding metal. You have led us on quite the chase. But it ends now. Surrender immediately and I will make your deaths quick. Resist, and I will keep you alive for weeks, broadcasting your screams across the galaxy as an example to others. Jake stepped into view of the communication pickup. Admiral Vexthul, is it? I'm Sergeant Morrison, representing Earth and humanity. I've got a counter-proposal for you. The Vorthan Admiral's compound eyes focused on Jake, studying this new species with interest. A human, how unexpected. Your reputation has not yet reached us, little creatures. What could you possibly offer that would interest me? Single combat, Jake said casually, as if he was discussing the weather. You and me. Winner takes all. If I win, your fleet turns around and goes home. If you win, we surrender without a fight. Every alien on the bridge stared at Jake in shock. Was he insane? Challenging a Vorthan admiral to single combat was suicide. Admiral Vexthul was known to have personally killed over 1,000 enemies in hand-to-hand combat. But Vexthul was intrigued. Interesting. And why would I risk myself against an unknown species when I have 50 ships to crush your one? Jake shrugged. Because you're curious. Because you want to know what humans are capable of. Because you've been terrorizing civilized species for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to face a real predator. The Vorthan Admiral's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Very well, human. Your bravery is admirable, if foolish. I will indulge your death wish. My personal shuttle will dock with your ship in 1 hour. We will fight in your cargo bay, and your crew can watch their hope die with you. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sergeant Morrison, Zextar said carefully, Admiral Vexthul has killed creatures 3 times your size. His natural armor can deflect energy weapons. His claws can tear through steel. He is one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Jake checked his gear one more time, making sure everything was secure. Captain, on Earth we have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. He looked up with that dangerous grin again. Time to show these aliens what a Earth dog can do. As Jake left the bridge to prepare for what everyone assumed would be his death, Captain Zextar couldn't shake the feeling that the Vorthan Admiral had just made a terrible mistake. The human wasn't just confident, he was eager. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. Predator versus predator, the cargo bay of the Crimson Fang had been cleared and converted into an impromptu arena. Alien crew members from dozens of species lined the upper levels, watching through reinforced windows. Word had spread throughout the ship about the human who had challenged Admiral Vexthul to single combat, and everyone wanted to witness what they assumed would be a spectacular, if brief, fight. Jake stood in the center of the massive space, doing final equipment checks. He had stripped down to basic combat gear, tactical vest, combat boots, and his weapons. Captain Zextar approached him, carrying what looked like a ceremonial drink. "Sergeant Morrison," the captain said quietly, "this is Kethal, a traditional drink we share before battle. It is meant to honor warriors who face impossible odds." Jake accepted the cup and drank without hesitation. The liquid burned going down, but left him feeling more alert and focused. "Thanks, Captain, but I don't plan on this being impossible odds." "The Admiral has fought over 1,000 duels," Zextar warned. "His species evolved from apex predators. He has natural weapons and armor that make him nearly unstoppable in close combat." "Nearly," Jake repeated with a slight smile. "I like that word. It means there's still a chance." Before Zextar could respond, the cargo bay's main doors opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The Vorthan shuttle had docked, and Admiral Vexthal emerged like a walking nightmare. Up close, the alien was even more terrifying. 8 feet of muscle and natural armor, moving with the fluid grace of a born killer. His 6 arms each ended in claws that looked like they could slice through titanium. His compound eyes tracked everything at once, taking in potential threats and escape routes. This was a creature that had been engineered by evolution to kill. Behind him came a small group of Vorthan officers, their own armor gleaming and weapons ready. They took positions around the edge of the cargo bay, making it clear that any treachery would be met with immediate violence. "So," Admiral Vexthal said, his voice echoing in the large space, "you are the human who thinks he can challenge the Butcher of Vex Prime. Tell me, little creature, have you ever killed before?" Jake's expression didn't change. "A few times." "A few times," the Admiral repeated mockingly. "I have killed thousands. I have torn apart entire armies with these claws. I have made warriors twice your size beg for mercy before I ended their miserable lives." "Sounds like you've had practice," Jake replied calmly. "Good. I hate fighting amateurs." The casual confidence in Jake's voice sent murmurs through the watching crew. Was the human truly fearless, or was he simply too ignorant to understand the danger he faced? Admiral Vexthal clicked his mandibles in amusement. "Very well. Let us establish the rules. No weapons, no armor beyond what nature provided. We fight until one of us cannot continue. When I defeat you, your ship surrenders, and I will make your deaths educational." "Sounds fair," Jake said, beginning to remove his tactical vest and weapons. "Just one thing, when I win, your whole fleet turns around and leaves Council space forever. Not just today, but permanently." The Vorthan officers laughed, a sound like grinding glass. The idea that this single human could defeat their admiral was absurd. But as Jake removed his gear, Admiral Vexthal studied the human's body with growing interest. Scars covered Jake's arms and torso, not random marks but the deliberate wounds of someone who had been in serious combat multiple times. And the way he moved, there was something predatory about it, something that reminded the Admiral of his own species' hunting stance. "Those scars," Vexthal said. "Where did you get them?" "Mars Colony War," Jake replied, setting his rifle aside. 3 tours. The rebels had some nasty weapons, and you survived." "I did more than survive." Jake pulled off his tactical vest, revealing more scars across his chest. "I won." The cargo bay fell silent as both combatants faced each other in the center of the space. Admiral Vexthal raised his 6 arms, claws extending to their full length. Jake simply stood there, hands loose at his sides, looking completely relaxed. "Begin," Captain Zextar announced. Admiral Vexthal struck with blinding speed, all 6 arms lashing out in a coordinated attack designed to overwhelm any opponent. His claws whistled through the air where Jake's head had been a split second before. But Jake wasn't there anymore. The human had moved faster than anyone thought possible, slipping to the side and slightly behind the Admiral. Before the alien could turn, Jake's fist connected with a nerve cluster at the base of Vexthal's neck, a spot he had noticed during the alien's intimidation display. The Admiral staggered, surprised. No one had ever moved fast enough to land the first blow against him. He spun around, swiping with 2 arms while the other 4 prepared for a follow-up attack. Jake ducked the first swipe, caught the second arm at the wrist, and used the Admiral's own momentum to throw the massive alien across the cargo bay. Vexthul hit the wall hard enough to dent the metal, but rolled to his feet immediately. "Impossible," one of the Vorthon officers whispered. The human moved like he knew exactly where the Admiral would strike. And Jake had known. During his 3 tours on Mars, he had fought against alien rebels who used similar multi-limb tactics. He had learned to read the micro-movements that preceded attacks, to find the weak points in natural armor, to use an opponent's size and strength against them. Admiral Vexthul charged again, this time more cautiously. But Jake was ready. He slid between the alien's legs, rolled to his feet behind him, and delivered a crushing blow to the Admiral's knee joint. The sound of cartilage tearing echoed through the cargo bay. The Admiral roared in pain and rage, spinning around with a wild backhand that would have taken Jake's head off, if Jake had been standing still. Instead, the human grabbed the striking arm, used it as a pivot point, and swung himself up to deliver a devastating elbow strike to the Admiral's temple. For the first time in his life, Admiral Vexthul went down. The cargo bay was dead silent. The legendary Butcher of Vex Prime was on his hands and knees, shaking his head to clear it. Jake stood over him, not even breathing hard. "Here's the thing about apex predators," Jake said conversationally. "On most worlds, there's only one per ecosystem. But Earth is different. On Earth, humans aren't the only apex predator. We had to compete with things that were bigger, stronger, and faster than us. You know how we won?" Admiral Vexthul struggled to his feet, ichor dripping from cuts on his natural armor. "How? We got smarter. We learned to use tools, tactics, and teamwork. But most importantly," Jake's eyes went cold, "we learned that sometimes, to beat a monster, you have to become something worse." The Admiral attacked again, desperation making him reckless. All 6 arms struck out in a frenzy of claws and fury. Jake moved like liquid mercury, flowing around the attacks, finding openings, striking nerve points and joint connections with surgical precision. It wasn't just that Jake was fast, he was efficient. Every movement had a purpose. Every strike hit exactly where it would do the most damage. This wasn't just combat training. This was the result of someone who had learned to fight against impossible odds and found a way to win. Admiral Vexthul began to slow. His attacks became less coordinated. Jake had been systematically disabling the alien's nervous system, targeting points that would cause maximum pain and disorientation without permanent damage. Finally, the Admiral collapsed, unable to continue. Jake stood over him, not even winded. "Do you yield?" Jake asked. Admiral Vexthul looked up at this human who had just done the impossible. In his compound eyes, Jake could see something that had probably never been there before. Respect. "I yield," the Admiral rasped. "The terms of our agreement stand. My fleet will withdraw from Council space permanently." Jake extended his hand to help the alien to his feet. After a moment's hesitation, Admiral Vexthul accepted the gesture. As the defeated Admiral was helped back to his shuttle by his shocked officers, Captain Zextar approached Jake in amazement. "How?" was all the captain could manage. Jake was putting his gear back on, checking his weapons out of habit. "Captain, Earth didn't send you a diplomat because we figured you already knew how to talk. We sent you something the Vorthons have never faced before, a human who learned to fight. On a world where everything was trying to kill him." He looked around at all the alien faces, staring at him in awe and fear. "Welcome to humanity. We're probably going to be good friends, as long as you never, ever try to conquer us." But as Jake finished gearing up, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Captain Zexitar's communication officer was shouting something urgent, but it was hard to hear over the noise. When the alarms finally stopped, the message was clear. Admiral Vexthul's shuttle had been destroyed just after leaving the Crimson Fang. The Vorthon fleet had just fired on their own Admiral's ship, and now they were moving to attack position, all 50 ships converging on the lone Council vessel. Jake sighed and checked his rifle. "I guess some people just don't know how to lose gracefully." Human tactics, Captain Zextar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The burning wreckage of Admiral Vexthul's shuttle drifted in space while the massive Vorthon fleet moved into attack formation. 50 ships against 1, honor and agreements forgotten. They killed their own admiral, Zextar whispered. Just to break the deal. Jake wasn't surprised. He had seen this kind of treachery before, during the Mars colony wars. Some enemies can't be reasoned with, Captain. They only understand force. The communication system crackled to life. A new Vorthan voice filled the bridge. Younger than Admiral Vexthal's, but somehow more vicious. This is Admiral Kexmal, new commander of the Vorthan fleet. The previous admiral was weak, corrupted by your pathetic human tricks. We do not recognize his agreement. Prepare to die, slowly and painfully. Jake keyed the communication pickup. Admiral Kexmal, this is Sergeant Morrison. I've got a message for you from Earth. Speak, human, before you scream. Jake's smile was sharp as a blade. The message is this. You just made this personal. The communication cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Outside the viewports, the Vortan fleet spread out like a deadly flower, each ship bristling with weapons. Energy readings spiked as they charged their main guns. Sergeant Morrison, Captain Zextar said carefully, I appreciate your confidence, but we are still outnumbered 50-1. Your victory over Admiral Vexthal was remarkable, but, Captain, Jake interrupted, studying the tactical display with intense focus. Tell me about your ship. What can she really do? Zextar straightened with pride. The Crimson Fang is the most advanced vessel in the Council fleet. Our main cannon can punch through any known armor. Our shields can withstand a direct hit from a dreadnought's primary weapon. Our engines can outrun anything in space. What about stealth capabilities? We have short-range cloaking, but it's mainly for reconnaissance. Against this many ships with their sensor arrays, and your crew. Jake cut him off again. How good are they? Captain Zextar looked around at his bridge officers. They came from 20 different worlds, each bringing their species' unique abilities. They are the finest warriors in the galaxy. Good. Jake turned to face the entire bridge crew. Then here's what we're going to do. We're going to show these Vorthans why humans don't just fight wars. We win them. He moved to the tactical display and began pointing out ship positions. Captain, I need you to trust me. Everything I'm about to ask you to do will go against your military training, your sense of honor, and probably your survival instincts. But if you want to save your crew and send a message that the Vorthan Empire will never forget, you'll do exactly what I say. Zextar looked into Jake's eyes and saw something that made him believe. This human had already done the impossible once today. What are your orders, Sergeant? Jake's grin was predatory. First, we're going to make them think they've already won. What followed was the most unconventional battle plan anyone on the bridge had ever heard. Jake outlined tactics that seemed insane, maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat, and strategies that no civilized military would ever consider. But as he explained his reasoning, the alien officers began to understand. This wasn't just military strategy, this was human psychology applied to warfare. Jake had studied the enemy, understood their weaknesses, and found ways to turn their own strengths against them. Remember, Jake concluded, Vorthans fight like predators. They're used to prey that runs or fights predictably. They've never faced prey that hunts back. The first phase of Jake's plan began immediately. Captain Zextar ordered his ship to broadcast a surrender signal, claiming that their weapons were damaged and they were requesting safe passage for their crew. The Vorthan fleet responded predictably, moving into a capture formation designed to surround the Council ship. They wanted prisoners to torture, examples to make. This was exactly what Jake had counted on. Cloaking device activated, the tactical officer reported. We're invisible, but only for about 10 minutes. That's all we need, Jake replied. Take us into the center of their formation. The Crimson Fang slipped between the massive Vorthan ships like a ghost, moving toward the 3 dreadnoughts at the fleet's heart. Jake watched the tactical display, timing everything perfectly. Now, he commanded. The Council ship decloaked right in the middle of the Vorthan fleet, surrounded by enemies on all sides. But instead of being trapped, Jake had positioned them exactly where he wanted to be. Fire everything at the lead dreadnought's engine core, Jake ordered. Full power, all weapons. The Crimson Fang's main cannon blazed to life, followed by every other weapon system on the ship. The concentrated firepower hit the dreadnought exactly where Jake had aimed. Not at the heavily armored command section, but at the more vulnerable engine housing. The massive Vorthan ship exploded in a chain reaction that lit up space like a new star. The shockwave caught two nearby cruisers, sending them tumbling out of control. But this was just the beginning of Jake's plan. Emergency acceleration, straight up, he shouted. Use the explosion's shockwave to boost our speed. The Crimson Fang rode the explosion's energy wave like a surfer riding a tsunami, accelerating far beyond its normal maximum speed. The sudden maneuver caught the Vorthans completely off guard. Second phase, Jake announced. Time to make them shoot each other. What followed was the most dangerous game of three-dimensional tag ever played in space. Jake used his knowledge of Vorthan psychology against them, exploiting their aggressive nature and pack mentality. He had the Crimson Fang dart between enemy ships, timing their movement so that when the Vorthans fired, they hit their own vessels instead of their target. They're getting frustrated, Captain Zexitar observed as another Vorthan ship was accidentally destroyed by friendly fire. Frustrated enemies make mistakes, Jake replied, and we're about to give them the biggest mistake of their lives. The third phase was the most audacious yet. Jake had studied the recordings of previous Vorthan battles, noting their formation tactics and communication protocols. Now he used that knowledge to turn their own fleet coordination against them. Jam their primary communication frequency and broadcast false orders, Jake commanded. Make it look like their new admiral is ordering different ships to attack different targets. Chaos erupted in the Vorthan fleet as ships received contradictory orders, seemingly from their own command structure. In the confusion, they began firing on each other in earnest, each group thinking the others had turned traitor. Impossible, breathed the sensor officer. They're destroying themselves. Not impossible, Jake corrected. Just human. We learned a long time ago that the best way to defeat a superior force is to make them defeat themselves. But as the Vorthan fleet tore itself apart, Jake noticed something troubling on the tactical display. The remaining dreadnought and several cruisers had figured out what was happening and were regrouping. Worse, they were positioning themselves between the Crimson Fang and the edge of the system. They're trying to box us in, Captain Zextar realized. Even with all the damage we've caused, they still have enough ships to overwhelm us. Jake studied the tactical situation. They had reduced the enemy fleet from 50 ships to about 20, but those 20 included the most powerful vessels, and now the element of surprise was gone. Then it's time for Phase 4, Jake said grimly. The part where we stop playing games and show them what humans do when we're really angry. He turned to Captain Zextar with an expression that made the alien's scales tingle with primal fear. Captain, I need you to ram that dreadnought. Every officer on the bridge stared at Jake in shock. Ram a ship many times their size. It was suicide. But Jake wasn't finished. Don't worry, we're not going to die. But they're going to wish they had never heard of Earth. As Captain Zextar gave the orders for what everyone assumed would be their final attack, Jake made one last preparation. He activated the ship's external communication system and broadcast on all frequencies, making sure every surviving Vorthan would hear his words. This is Sergeant Jake Morrison representing Earth and humanity. You wanted to know what we're capable of. You're about to find out. And when you do, remember this moment. Remember that you brought this on yourselves. The Crimson Fang accelerated toward the massive dreadnought, and Jake's final gambit began. Earth's answer. The Crimson Fang hurtled through space toward the Vorthan dreadnought at maximum acceleration. On the bridge, alien officers gripped their stations as G-forces pressed them into their seats. Captain Zextar watched the distance counter tick down and wondered if the human had finally asked him to do something impossible. But Jake Morrison stood calmly in the center of the bridge, timing everything to the second. At the last possible moment, he shouted, "Emergency brake and reverse thrust. All power to forward shields." The Council ship's engines screamed as they fought against momentum. The Crimson Fang slowed just enough to avoid destruction while still hitting the dreadnought with tremendous force. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels, but Jake had calculated everything perfectly. The collision tore a massive hole in the dreadnought's hull. But more importantly, it had embedded the Crimson Fang's bow section deep into the enemy ship's superstructure. The two vessels were now locked together, with the Council ship protected by the dreadnought's own bulk from the other Vorthan ships. Phase 4B, Jake announced. Boarding action. Captain Zextar stared at him. You want us to board a Vorthan dreadnought? Not us, Jake corrected, checking his weapons one final time. Me? I'm going over there to have a conversation with their new admiral. The bridge fell silent. Even by human standards, this was insane. Board an enemy dreadnought single-handedly? Fight through hundreds of Vorthan warriors to reach their command center? Sergeant Morrison, Captain Zextar said carefully, there are over 2,000 Vorthans on that ship. Even you cannot, can't I? Jake's eyes held that dangerous gleam again. Captain, I've been holding back this whole time, trying to be diplomatic. But they killed their own admiral to break an honorable agreement. They're planning to torture your crew just to make a point, and they've decided that humanity isn't worth respecting. He shouldered his rifle and headed for the airlock. Time to correct that mistake. Wait, Captain Zextar called out. At least take some of my warriors with you. Jake paused at the bridge entrance and looked back with a smile that was somehow both grateful and terrifying. Thanks, Captain, but this is something I need to do alone. Besides, he hefted his rifle, I'm not planning to fight 2,000 Vorthans. Then what are you planning? I'm planning to scare them. The interior of the Vorthan dreadnought was a nightmare of twisted metal and organic architecture. The walls pulsed like living tissue, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and predator musk. Jake moved through the corridors like a ghost, his military training keeping him invisible to the repair, crews rushing to seal hull breaches, but he wasn't. Trying to stay hidden for long, Jake found what he was looking for, a main corridor that connected to the ship's communication system. He planted a small device on the nearest interface panel and activated it. Suddenly, his voice echoed throughout the entire dreadnought. Attention Vorthan Empire forces. This is Sergeant Jake Morrison of Earth. I am currently aboard your flagship, and I have a message for Admiral Kexmal. Emergency klaxons began blaring as Vorthan warriors rushed toward his position. Jake calmly drew his sidearm and continued speaking. Admiral, you made a mistake when you killed Admiral Vexthal. See, he understood something that you don't. He knew that humans aren't just another prey species for you to hunt. The first group of Vorthan soldiers rounded the corner, their natural armor gleaming and energy weapons charged. They saw one human standing alone in their corridor and charged forward with roars of bloodlust. Jake moved, his rifle spoke in short, controlled bursts. Each shot was perfectly placed, finding the weak points in Vorthan armor that he had memorized during his fight with Admiral Vexthal. The aliens fell before they could even return fire. Their own speed and aggression turned against them in the narrow corridor. We're the species that survived the Ice Ages. Jake continued his broadcast, stepping over Vorthan bodies as more soldiers rushed toward the sound of gunfire. We're the species that turned wolves into pets and made tools out of everything we touched. More Vorthans appeared, a full squad this time, moving with military precision. Jake disappeared into a side passage, then emerged behind them. His combat knife found the nerve clusters in their necks before they knew he was there. We're the species that looked at a world full of things trying to kill us and said challenge accepted. The dreadnought's corridors became a maze of horror as Jake moved through them like an unstoppable force. He used every trick he had learned in 3 tours of urban combat, every lesson from fighting alien rebels on Mars. Booby traps made from ship components, ambushes from ventilation shafts, psychological warfare that left surviving Vorthans too terrified to pursue him. But Jake wasn't just killing, he was teaching. Each encounter demonstrated a different aspect of human warfare. The Vorthans began to understand that they weren't fighting a warrior like themselves. They were facing something that fought without honor, without rules, without mercy when mercy wasn't deserved. You see, Admiral. Jake's voice continued to echo through the ship as he fought his way toward the command center. Humans learned a long time ago that there are 2 kinds of beings in the universe. There are those who can be reasoned with, negotiated with, lived alongside in peace. He paused at an intersection, listening to the heavy footsteps of Vorthon reinforcements. When they rounded the corner, they found only empty corridors and the scattered remains of their comrades. And then there are those who only understand violence, who mistake mercy for weakness and honor for stupidity, who think that being civilized makes you soft. Jake had reached the Dreadnought's command center. Through the massive doors, he could hear Admiral Kexmal screaming orders at his subordinates, demanding to know how one human was tearing apart his ship from the inside. For those beings, Jake said, placing shaped charges around the command center's blast doors, humanity has a special response. The explosions blew the doors inward, filling the command center with smoke and debris. When it cleared, Jake stood in the doorway like an avatar of death itself. His armor was scorched and torn, his weapons were running low on ammunition, and alien ichor covered his combat knife. But his eyes were still calm, still focused, still utterly without fear. Admiral Kexmal stood at the center of the command bridge, surrounded by his surviving officers. The young Vorthon was larger than Admiral Vexthul had been, with fresh scars covering his natural armor and mandibles that dripped with anticipation of combat. "So," Admiral Kexmal hissed, "the human terror finally shows himself. You have killed many of my warriors, but it ends here." Jake surveyed the command center, noting the positions of the officers, the locations of the weapon controls, the emergency systems. "Admiral, I want you to understand something. Everything that's happened so far, that was me being diplomatic." He raised his rifle, and every Vorthon officer tensed for combat. "This is me when diplomacy fails." What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Jake moved through the command center like liquid death, his rifle speaking with surgical precision. But he wasn't trying to kill everyone. He was making a point. Each shot disabled weapons without harming their wielders. Each movement positioned him perfectly to control the entire room. Within seconds, every Vorthon officer was disarmed and vulnerable. While Jake stood untouched in the center of their command bridge, Admiral Kexmal found himself staring down the barrel of Jake's rifle, while the human's other hand held a grenade with the pin already pulled. "Here's what's going to happen," Jake said conversationally. "You're going to order your entire fleet to withdraw from Council space immediately. You're going to broadcast that withdrawal order on all frequencies so everyone can hear it. And you're going to make sure that every Vorthon in the Empire knows exactly what happened here today." "And if I refuse?" The Admiral snarled. Jake's smile was colder than space itself. "Then I let go of this grenade. Your command center explodes, your ship loses control and crashes into one of your cruisers, and the resulting chain reaction takes out half your fleet. Either way, the Vorthon Empire learns not to mess with humans. The only question is whether you're alive to remember the lesson." For a long moment, the command center was silent, except for the sound of damaged systems sparking and the heavy breathing of terrified Vorthon officers. Finally, Admiral Kexmal reached for his communication controls. "All Vorthon ships," he broadcast, his voice filled with barely controlled rage and fear. "This is Admiral Kexmal. We are withdrawing from this system immediately. All vessels, set course for home space and execute emergency retreat." "Good," Jake said, but he didn't lower his weapon. Now the Empire-wide broadcast. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in fury, but he complied. "To all forces of the Vorthon Empire, this is Admiral Kexmal. As of today, Council space is to be considered off-limits to all Imperial ships. Any vessel attempting to enter Council territory will be considered in violation of direct orders." Jake nodded approvingly. "And tell them why." Admiral Kexmal's compound eyes burned with hatred, but he spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy. "Because the humans have made it clear that they are not prey. They are predators, and they are under the protection of Earth." As the Vorthon fleet began its retreat, Jake made his way back through the Dreadnought's corridors to the airlock where he had entered. Behind him, he left a ship full of traumatized warriors and a message that would spread throughout the Empire. Humanity was not to be underestimated. When he finally made it back to the Crimson Fang, Captain Zextar was waiting for him at the airlock with the entire bridge crew. "Sergeant Morrison," the captain said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Council. I thank you for— Don't, Jake interrupted, suddenly looking very tired. Don't thank me, Captain. What I did over there, that wasn't heroic. That was necessary. There's a difference. He looked around at all the alien faces staring at him with awe and fear. Your people fight with honor because you're trying to build something better. Don't lose that. The galaxy needs beings who still believe in doing things the right way. But sometimes, Captain Zextar said quietly, we need someone willing to do things the wrong way so that the right way can survive. Jake nodded. Maybe, but let's hope it doesn't come to that very often. As the Crimson Fang disengaged from the crippled dreadnought and began its journey home, Jake made one final broadcast. This one wasn't for the Vorthons or the Council forces. This one was for Earth. Mission Control, this is Sergeant Morrison. Cultural exchange mission complete. I think they understand us now. He paused, looking out at the stars where the Vorthon fleet was disappearing into hyperspace, carrying word of humanity to every corner of the galaxy. Tell Command they can send the Diplomats next time, but maybe include a few more Marines in the escort, just in case. Epilogue. Months later, the story of Sergeant Jake Morrison and the Battle of Crimson Fang had spread throughout the galaxy. The Vorthon Empire had indeed withdrawn from Council space, and their raids on civilian populations had stopped entirely. Some said it was because they were planning something bigger. Others believed they were genuinely afraid of provoking humanity further. Captain Zextar, now promoted to Admiral for his role in the victory, kept a small device on his desk, the translation unit that Jake had used during their first meeting. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most important diplomatic tool wasn't words. It was the willingness to back those words up with action, and somewhere in Council space, on a dozen different worlds, recruitment posters had appeared with a simple message. Earth needs you. Diplomatic Corps now hiring. Combat experience preferred. Because the galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity, they made excellent friends and terrible enemies. The choice of which one you got was entirely up to you. But choose wisely, because humans, as the Vorthon Empire had discovered, never forgot those who broke their trust, and they never, ever fought fair when the stakes were high enough. The end.